Welcome to a football show, Thursday edition. His name is Zach Lyons. My name is Braden Gall, and we've got a lot of stuff planned for you today on the program. We're going to take a look at some Titans who are at the end of the rope. This is their last chance to make the roster. Guys that are going to be having to fight like crazy to make the roster, who have maybe been on this team for a couple of years. We'll see what kind of roles they are. Some of the guys that might get pushed out by this draft class, and some of the names that I think, frankly, Zach, if they develop and if they become, I'm going to call them the house money guys. If the house money guys actually deliver anything at all, could that be the difference between a team that wins 6 and 7 games or a team that competes for a division championship? I'm just going to put the house money guys as a name out there. So we'll get into those guys as well. So what does the depth chart look like now that, of course, all of these new pieces are here, but free agency is not yet done. Zach, I'm going to get your thoughts on the Tyler Boyd rumors as well as a couple of other positions that might be available as we are now entering this other new phase of the NFL offseason, which is like post-free agency, post-draft. I don't know what you call it, like the dessert section of the offseason. I don't know exactly what it is, but there are items to be served and items to be consumed. So there you go. Derek is in the comments already. Good afternoon, Bo. Good to see you. Bo is saying that I am blurry. Zach, you are saying that I am blurry. I cannot see.
Yep.
I cannot see me being blurry. I can't.
Yeah.
I can't.
You're blurry on Twitter too. So I don't know what's going on. I look fantastic.
So here's what we're gonna do. First of all, thanks to Sinkers Beverages and the Kingston Group for making this show possible each and every Monday and Thursday, live on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. No matter how good the quality is of the video, we are in fact live. I'm going to try to troubleshoot that here in just a second, but special thanks to Sinkers Beverages and the Kingston Group. Yes, Stoney, I know. Zach told me before the show, I can't see that I am blurry, so I'm going to try to adjust that.
Worse and worse. It's what's really weird. The angrier you get, the worse it gets. I don't know if it's tied to your emotional spectrum or not, but it is. It's kind of funny that the blurrier you are, the angrier you are. Well, as you try to fix that. I mean, like it has to be your internet connection, I would assume, or something. But we may never be able to fix it. We may just have to go through with the blurry Braden, and I think that's best for everybody if we have to go through with the blurry Braden.
You think so? You think so? You think it's good to go blurry? How about all like nothing? How about
it may not be good for production value, but it may be good for everybody's eyesight. There you go. I don't know what you just did, but it is perfect.
I told you I'd fix it. I told you I'd take care of it. Thank you all, Derek, Stoney, Bo, Team Ramrod, everybody for calling us out. We do appreciate it. You got to keep us accountable. That's the best way. That's the best way this whole thing works. So obviously stackingtheinbox.com, football and other F words, and all the other great products across the 440 Sports Network. Quick housekeeping here, Zach, if you don't mind. First of all, the Sinkers Beverages gear. They've got really good gear. They got great shirts, but really their hats are on point. So if you want one of these Sinkers hats, I got the black one on. I've showed you earlier. This thing is sweet right here. So they got really good gear. So if you're in Sinkers, make sure you check that out. And of course, the Kingston Group, buildkg.com, Nashville's locally owned custom home and remodeling firm. I've also have a messaging Titans Twitter thing that I want to float to you, and I want to get your opinion on that as well. But Rhett Bryan from Titans Radio Network, executive producer. We had about a 40-minute conversation with him about how they execute their draft coverage, how they build all the vignettes, how they study their big board, how they build the horizontal and vertical big board, just like you do, Zach. So if you want to hear from Rhett Bryan, tell some Coach Mack stories.
If they would just hire me.
Well, if you want to hear some Coach Mack stories, a little insight behind the scenes on every one of these draft picks, and lots of other Titans-related topic, make sure you check out Lamestream Sports on Friday. We're going to have a long conversation with Rhett Bryan coming up on that episode, so make sure you check that out as well. And I think that's all. I guess, look, by the time you're listening to this, if it's Friday afternoon or the weekend, depending on when you catch us, video or pod form, the Tyler Boyd news saga could already be over. He might be signed as a Tennessee Titan. He might be signed as somebody else. I think the two most important questions here, and I want to get your opinion on this, is like how much does he help the offense? How valuable could he be for this team, for Will Levis, for Brian Callahan? And number two, if the Titans really do want him, there doesn't seem like a reason that they couldn't go get him because they have the space and they have the relationships. So it does sort of feel like this is up to the Titans to make it happen if they really truly want him. The question I have for you to start, Zach, is how much better does this team get with him? How important would he be? Do you like the idea and the move?
Okay, I'm gonna ignore the order you want me to answer them, and I'm gonna answer them with your second question first. And that would be, I think the only thing that could prevent them from not signing him, like you said, and there should be no reason if they want him to sign him, it's his asking price. He wanted to wait until after the draft. That is a vet savvy move by him and his agent because really the teams that want him, supposedly the Steelers have entertained the idea before the draft, but they couldn't reach a reasonable contract number from what I remember reading way back before the draft. Since then, he's obviously been to the Chargers. What do the Chargers need more than anything? Wide receivers. Do they need a slot wide receiver? No, because you have Lad McConkey, but they need wide receivers, right? On the flip side,
that's an interesting
what do the
twist.
Titans need?
Interesting twist.
What do the Titans need? A wide receiver. And what do they need the most? A slot wide receiver. So he's kind of in the driver's seat at this point in time. He can at least pit two teams against each other to a point. And the Titans have shown that if they get into a bidding war, they do have a limit that they will not go past. And if they, so there you go. That would be the reason, would be his asking price. That's the only reason.
Yeah, because I think, because even then, well, I want to, staying on that, if you think he is, like, I'm just going to make up numbers here just for the sake of the conversation. Like, if you think he is that valuable to the offense, and I can totally see the argument as to why he would be an incredibly valuable piece for Will Levis. He fills a need in the slot. He has a relationship with the offense and the coordinator and the guy drawing up the plays. And he is a veteran that gives Will Levis 3 extremely experienced receivers to call on in his first season as a starting quarterback. So if you value him and that role and think he's worth 8, I'm going to make up numbers here. If you think he's valuable at $7 million or $8 million or $9 million a year, and you think he's worth it for those reasons, then why wouldn't he be worth it at 10 or 11? It's not going to be a 5-year contract.
Well, I think
going to be
your
a
first set of numbers.
Years.
The problem with the argument, and maybe this is, or your statement is that your first set of numbers are the max. He's not worth more than what you are saying. He may not even really be worth that top end of what you're saying. I mean, this is really a $4 million, $5 million, 1-year deal kind of guy. So to go 7 or 8 or 9 million, you got to remember he's not worth. You got to pay players what they're worth or what their production could be worth, and really what he brings, which is like, maybe you'll get 670 yards, 660 yards. Maybe you'll get 500 yards. You can get that with NWI. So it's not necessarily a need where you have to go out and spend the money to overpay. It's overpaying, in quotation marks, for Calvin Ridley is an entirely different situation and set of circumstances than overpaying for Tyler Boyd. And I understand that we're talking the difference between 5 and 8 million. But that's a bad precedence in negotiating standards to just overpay for stuff. And I'm against really taking that step for mediocre players, for average NFL players. For above average players, you take that step. For guys like this, no, go have fun in LA. That's what I would. Well, go have fun in LA. Enjoy your property, your income taxes, enjoy your high rent and all that kind of stuff, and see you later.
Nashville, not a cheap place to live either, but definitely no income tax. I think what I'm trying to get at is if you think as an organization he is worth it to you because of X, Y, and Z reason, which I think are very obvious. Like, he is a veteran who's going to fill a role in the offense and help develop your quarterback, who gives you 3 veteran voices in the receiving room that Will Levis can trust in his first season as a starter, who happens to know the offensive system extremely well. That's all the positives. There's a reason he's meeting with the Titans. There's a reason they're interested in him. And if they are interested,
he's still a free agent.
There's absolutely. And it like, again, outside of something insane, like, oh, I want 11. Again, I just was making those numbers up. If he's worth it to the Titans at $5 million a year, I don't see why he wouldn't be worth it at 7, because again, you have the relationships and you have the money. There's no reason to get bid out if you think he's that good for your specific situation. If he is not, then I guess you're just kind of kicking the tires on a low rent object that you think you might be able to get on the cheap. And then he can't.
There's a lot of Tyler Boyds on the market. I guess that's my point. So you don't have to overpay. If you're wanting a slot guy, go after Hunter Renfrow. Go after Michael Thomas and put him in the slot. Let him be a big slot. Go after Russell Gage, Zay Jones, DJ Chark. I mean, there are other options out there, so you don't have to overpay. And overpaying just because your buddies with them is not just it's just not smart business.
Well,
Objectively, it's just not smart
I'm
business.
not saying do that because you're friends. I'm saying do that because he provides value. But that's my argument is
But
if
so do all these other guys. All these other guys provide the same kind of value in this system with two other wide receivers already established on the outside. He doesn't provide you anything other than familiarity. His talent level is nothing that amazing that you could not find if he just doesn't if he's asking for too much money.
Wonderfully named commenter John Gall says Tyler Boyd has the knowledge base, not buddies. Yeah, I mean, I don't know about their relationship from a friendship standpoint. I don't care about that.
Well, I mean, it's just you guys know what I mean. They have a relationship, right?
I'm
do you think
saying
that they're hiring enemies and wanting to hire enemies?
no. But
That they hate.
But Brian Callahan's not going to go overpay somebody that doesn't create value on the field for him. I think there is something to be said. Like, first of all, I like Tyler Boyd the player. I'm not suggesting he's worth more than what you're saying. I'm just saying I like Tyler Boyd the player. I like that he knows
He is a used car. Like the guys, he is a used car.
I totally agree with you on that. He's absolutely a used car. But anybody that's still available on the free agent market right now is technically a used car. Now, there's lots of great value in used cars. I've never purchased a new car in my life. It's been great. My point is, I like him as a player. I love the fact that he knows the offense inside and out. And I think if it's a short-term deal, I'm okay overpaying for 1 year because it's Will Levis's first season as a starter, and he gives you a 1-2-3 that's better than this organization has ever had, all three of whom are veterans, and he can help. Like, if you're looking, and we're going to talk about this because Kyle Phillips is under a lot of pressure, especially if Tyler Boyd is signed, or maybe he's on a different team. I don't know. But Kyle Phillips and Jaquan Jackson are the two slot guys that are going to battle for that role. Maybe they mix in Treylon Burks. Maybe they mix in a tight end. But Tyler Boyd becomes that guy. And if you're telling me I've got a proven commodity as a slot receiver, I've got Calvin Ridley as my move, and I've got DeAndre Hopkins as my out wide X, I think that's a really, really great place to put Will Levis. And so
I
all
agree.
I'm saying.
You should attack it, but it does not have to be Tyler Boyd, is what I'm saying.
Okay.
Everybody's like, it has to be Tyler Boyd. Well, if they should pay Tyler Boyd so X amount of money over what he's really worth, that's not what you need to do at this point. There are other players you can get that can provide you what Tyler Boyd does. They may not provide you the familiarity with Brian Callahan, but this isn't like some foreign first time offensive, style that is being introduced into the NFL. This is a pretty common offensive system.
So he's a foreign used car or he's an American made used car? Which one is he?
No, foreign is the other one, but he is a 2017 Honda Acura. He's reliable,
Honda Acura,
or yeah, whatever.
Honda Accord.
Honda Accord.
That's a pretty damn good
car. He's super dependable, and he's always going to be there for you. And there's 1,000 of them on the road.
I think we could do the entire Titans roster as used cars if we wanted to. We've got J.C. Latham, who's a Dodge Ram Hemi 1500 sitting back there. We could do the whole roster. That would not be a fun show. Either way, when I saw the news, I think it's a really savvy move. And there's, like, again, if you think he's the right guy for the job, you can't get outbid because you have tons of cash. It's not an expensive item, and he brings value to your team that he doesn't necessarily bring to other teams. So I don't know. I just think it's a smart move. We'll find out probably Friday or this weekend whether or not it's happened or not. My question to you to wrap up this whole thing is: are there isn't safety? Are there other positions you'd rather see Rand Carthon and the Titans go investigate and spend in free agency?
Well, and I'm sure they're still investigating. We just haven't heard about it. But I mean, I still think you need a. If I were wish casting what this team would do, I would go first off, find a starting safety, Marcus May or Justin Simmons. Right? Let's put them up there. I'm in. Mm-hmm. That'd be great. Carl Lawson is out there who has a relationship with Brian Callahan as well, who can actually come in and play meaningful snaps. That would be hard to find, but he does have injury concerns, but that's a guy that I would be bringing in. And then I would go like a backup swing tackle, Andres Pete or Cam Fleming, to kind of be that guy that is technically behind J.C. Latham. But if someone on the other side, right tackle, or someone gets hurt, he can fill in on both sides no matter what you need done. They currently really don't have that guy. And the guys that can do that are not that good. So I would rather have a guy like a Cam Fleming or Andres Pete. I know that Andres Pete is primarily a guard, but he has played left tackle. He has experience playing tackle spots. I mean, it's not extensive or anything. So then I would go wide receiver. Like, I feel like this, really veteran tight end before I'd go wide receiver. We haven't really talked about that since the draft, but veteran tight end they need one or two tight ends, it feels like. And I'm not counting on any of these UDFAs that Mike loves for whatever reason, but they need a tight end. They need two. So at this point, this feels like a luxury signing, but I'm also okay with that, right? Like, I'm okay with, you want to spend money on Tyler Boyd? Do you want to spend money on Michael Thomas or Hunter Renfrow? To a certain point, I get it. I understand it because it pushes other people down the depth charts. And what have we said all season? You can't go in with a depth chart that looks like it has and has remained since the offseason or since the signing of Calvin Ridley. We keep saying to push people down the depth chart. So I'm good. I'm good with the signing, and it makes complete sense, and it strengthens your team in a very, very good way.
A couple of comments here I want to mention. Trey Wynn says, who on the roster is the Tesla truck? That was Isaiah Wilson. Isaiah Wilson was absolutely the Tesla truck. Big, giant, enormous potential, recalled immediately. Trey also says, feels like Burks could be your third tight end. I assume that's what he meant with the LOL. Really pricey, but doesn't.
That's your Tesla truck.
Oh, okay. All right. I think he's, well, maybe, I don't know. Maybe he's onto something. John Nwukwu, tight end 3, from Stony. You're right. They need some veteran presence there. I do have a question, because this kind of gets right. We can go right into our sort of what does the roster look like now with all these new players here, and we can kind of. I think it's, to me, starting with the receiving group and the tight end group and the running back group as a group. I think ultimately what Boyd does, or anybody else that you've mentioned, is you are trying to set Will Levis up for as much possible success in the first year as a full year starter as you can. And having somebody sure and dependable, I'm okay with that. That is not Treylon Burks. That is not Kyle Phillips. I do think NWI fits the mold of a dependable. He's going to be where you need him to be on every route. He's not a playmaker. He's only on the field because of other things that happen. But I think when he's on the field, he kind of does what he's supposed to do. I don't think he overachieves or underachieves.
Except for be good.
He just is. I think I don't know if you're anti NWI. I think there's a like, it seems like you can only be anti or pro NWI. I feels like you can't just be like apathetic. Like, I think NWI is a totally fine player for what he is. I think he's totally fine.
The problem is he constantly, and I keep saying this, he's constantly your wide receiver too.
Yeah, he
finds a way to be your wide receiver too. And guess what? He's not good enough to do that. So he deserves every bit of criticism that he gets. And I get that it's through no fault of his own, but the Tennessee Titans need to stop employing him and let him go do that to someone else's locker. Like, you should send NWI to the Colts or the Texans and let him infiltrate the starting lineup by sucking the life force out of their wide receivers instead of doing that to your wide receiver.
Well, again, I think NWI is a wonderful wide receiver 4 or 5. I think he's a perfect player for that role. He does everything you want him to do. He's great on special teams. He's got good hands. He's a good blocker. He runs perfect routes. He's where you need him to be. He's not going to make any big plays. And if you get injured, he's capable of helping you in certain situations. I don't think there's anything wrong with having a player like that on your team. Would you rather have 4 Jamar Chases? Of course, we all would. Derek says he saw a Tesla truck. The Tesla truck is cool in person. I saw one on the road last week.
I don't really care to talk about the Tesla truck.
Did it have a brake? Did it have the ability to stop? Right, because that's the accelerator pedal that I think got it kicked back. So ultimately, Treylon Burks is the top of the list of guys that we've kind of called house money. And I do think that there's enough players in this category across the entire roster that the house money players could play a role on the team should things fall right for this team, but you can't count on it. So in the receiving room and the tight end room, because I think, to your point, there's still questions in the tight end room that we have not addressed.
We only have 2. I don't care what they I don't care about Thomas Odukoya. I don't care about the 2 undrafted free agents. They only have 2 tight ends. Let's
I
all be
I agree with you.
clear and honest with that.
I agree with you. If Tyler Boyd is signed, I think you're looking at one of the better receiving cores, receiving rooms we've seen in this franchise in quite some time. I still think they're very good if they don't sign Tyler Boyd. No, Tyler Boyd is not D good. Tyler Boyd is not receiver 2. He's wide receiver 3, aka slot 1, if that's what you want to call it. But he does push Phillips and Jackson down. He pushes Burks down, and that's sort of what you're looking for. Pushes NWI down.
He sort of pushes Burks down. Like, I think people are kind of overrating the Boyd impact because there's not overlap in that position for them to. So you're talking about a guy that plays, almost near 90% of his snaps in the slot in Tyler Boyd, and a guy who plays near 90% of his slots on the outside. So when they need an outside receiver, it's going to be, and specifically probably the Calvin Ridley role, it's going to be Treylon Burks. Whether that's Boyd's there or not, it's going to be Treylon Burks. So I don't really think it really affects the snap count that as much as what everybody wants to think.
No, I think that it's just a depth. It's a depth thing. But I agree with your role estimate. Here, let me ask you this: they line up in 11 personnel. Who are the 3 receivers right now without Tyler Boyd on the team? Who is the?
I would say that if you asked me that question, I would go DeAndre Hopkins, Calvin Ridley, Kyle Phillips would be your 1, 2, 3 and 11 personnel. Now, I think that if you want to get crazy and creative, there will be situations where Treylon Burks is outside, Treylon Burks is inside, and then they move someone around. But I think if you're just talking pretty standard, coming out, lining up 3 wide, no trickery, just standard pass play, that would be your 3.
Is there a chance Ridley gets moved around more? I mean, I think Ridley's your move guy.
I think they're all going to get moved around more, but I mean, we're talking 20% of their snaps are going to be in the slot. It's not going to be 50-50 or anything crazy. It's just, I looked at Jamar Chase. Jamar Chase has spent time in the slot at 20% of a clip.
Do you think it is a Phillips or Jackson conversation, or do you think it's a Phillips and Jackson conversation?
I think right now it's Phillips or and Jackson, because I think both could make it on this team because there's nobody pushing them from behind for a roster spot, right? If Tyler Boyd gets added, so if he is there, then it becomes one or the other. And this idea that this team is just going to keep Jaquan Jackson because they just drafted him, that ain't how it works. That's never how it works in the NFL. And that hasn't been how it has worked throughout the Tennessee Titans' entire tenure here. There have been guys that have been drafted that don't make it the first 53, and you have to earn your way on this roster. And that's like that across the entirety of the NFL if you're a 6th or 7th round pick.
I find this to be fascinating because all the things we say about Treylon Burks is not dependable, hasn't made plays, dropped passes, hurt all the time, hasn't figured it out, hasn't clicked. Well, I don't agree. I would not say some of those things about Kyle Phillips from understands the game, practices hard, that kind of stuff. I wouldn't compare them. But it's the same stuff, like muffed punts, can't stay healthy, not available. I'm curious if we just are missing, if they view Jackson as you seem to be putting a lot of faith in Phillips being the officially starting slot receiver right now.
Well, because
I don't think he's proven anything.
Well, I think he's proven that he can play at the NFL level. I think the offenses have been terrible around him, and yes, he's been injured as well. But Jaquan Jackson hasn't proved anything.
No,
at least that Kyle Phillips and Will Levis have a rapport and chemistry, and we've seen it that when he is the target, he's a reliable, dependable player. Jaquan Jackson has been injured throughout his college career. Jaquan Jackson has muffed punts. So, I mean, everything that you just said that pushes Kyle Phillips down on your list is everything that Jaquan Jackson did at college, and he hasn't even made it to the NFL yet. He hasn't even taken an NFL, snap. At least with Kyle Phillips you can. And this idea that Jaquan Jackson's just automatically going to make the team as a returner, well, no, he's got serious competition all across the board just in that spot alone. Then you got to factor in, okay, well, now he's got to fight for that spot, and he has to fight for the slot spot. I just think that, yes, I get the reservations with Kyle Phillips, but Jaquan Jackson being even penciled in above him, let alone markered in above him, No, I don't buy that. He's going to have to earn it. That's what you have to do in the NFL.
I agree. My concern, and the reason I kind of phrase it that way when I ask you, is my concern is like I'm almost 100% positive you're going to have Hopkins, Ridley, Burks, and NWI on the roster, barring a move. I don't think that. I mean, the reason you are talking to Tyler Boyd is that you have questions about Phillips and Jackson, and I think there's a chance that neither of them is your starting slot receiver at the start of the season. I don't know how they solve that problem.
But I mean, you're saying that if you don't sign Tyler Boyd, I mean, that's the whole base of my question. If you don't sign Tyler Boyd, I'd be really hard pressed to believe that the starting slot guy is not on your roster already, because that's kind of how they've been playing this whole season, right? I don't like it. I don't agree with their philosophy and strategy. I have said you shouldn't factor in Treylon Burks in your plans. You shouldn't factor in Kyle Phillips in your plans. But hell, we're in the 9th inning now, and that's what they've done. I mean, they have factored in both those guys in their plans. Does not mean that they can't. If they find a guy that they can replace him with at a reasonable price, they wouldn't. If they could find a trade partner for Treylon Burks at a reasonable price, they probably would trade him away. But they have factored them in with plans to be. That's why you draft Jaquan Jackson in the 6th round,
right?
Because he's not right now. He's kind of like insurance and backup for Kyle Phillips.
Is there a creative answer that we're not thinking? Because I agree with you. I feel uncomfortable. Maybe that's the right word. I don't love the idea, to your point about not liking the strategy. I don't like that right now on paper it appears that their plan is Phillips v. Jackson v. Kinsey, I guess, to be the starting slot receiver. That to me doesn't feel like you're putting
Kearis Jackson. I guess if you want to include him,
it doesn't feel like you're putting your best players on the field in that situation. And again, that's assuming Kyle Phillips is Kyle Phillips. Like he can't stay healthy either. So is there a more creative option that we're missing here? Is it moving Ridley into the slot and playing NWI? Is it moving Burks into the slot? Is there something else?
No, I think they think they're going to do. Anytime NWI is on the field, you're way worse than having Kyle Phillips on the field. Kyle Phillips
but he's
is
not
a better wide receiver. He is right now. I mean, like that's what I'm saying. I mean, you're projecting he's automatically injured, and maybe he is injured again. I don't know. But you're asking me right now today, what is the best 3 wide receivers that you could put on the field? Wide receivers. That does not include NWI. I would include Burks over NWI. But if you're talking about starting 11 personnel, it's likely going to be DeAndre Hopkins, Kyle Phillips, and Calvin Ridley, sans Tyler Boyd. Now, obviously, Tyler Boyd's signed. I think we all can figure out how the 11 personnel is going to work.
Sure.
But I mean, as far as wide receivers go, here's the thing, and I think this is where everybody's a little overthinking it. They clearly like people with positional flexibility, but they fit a perfect slot in one situation. So what I say by that is that they like that Calvin Ridley and DeAndre Hopkins can be moved on 3 or 4 plays in a game into your slot. They like having that option. They like having that ability. But what they want is a guy that can play that 80% of the time. And those 2 guys on this roster, 3 guys, if you want to include Mason Kinsey for whatever reason, those 3 guys are Kyle Phillips, Jaquan Jackson, and Mason Kinsey. So those are going to be your base slot, 3rd wide receiver slot. Listen, if you go to the outside and have 2 wide receivers on the outside bunched up together and 1 on the other side, that could be Treylon Burks, right? So maybe just don't have a slot guy, just have 2 outside wide receivers to avoid it. But at the end of the day, your slot guy is going to play that spot 80% of his snaps that he's available for your team. And that best guy on their roster for that role right now is Kyle Phillips.
And I wonder, because if I don't necessarily disagree with you, if you're asking me who are the best 3 players at the position if they achieve their full potential, it's not even close. It's the 3 guys who were drafted in the 1st round. It's Calvin Ridley, DeAndre Hopkins, Treylon Burks. And if there's a way to be creative with moving Ridley, you play 3 outside guys. Maybe you move Burks on 1 play. Maybe you move Ridley on another play. Then maybe Kyle Phillips can play a play. Then maybe you bring in a 2 tight end set. Like I can see them being super flexible and trying to get creative with Ridley and Burks, because from a pure talent standpoint, Traylon Burks has the pure talent, but again, zero consistency and dependability. Like just like Phillips, in my opinion, there's just no there's no way you can bank
But we're
on
talking about 20% of your entire plays that this is going to happen. Like that's what I'm trying to get across is that yes, DeAndre Hopkins is going to play the slot.
Bingo.
Calvin Ridley, Traylon Burks, NWI, they're all Chig Okonkwo, Tyjae Spears, Tony Pollard. They're all going to play in that slot role in quotation marks. But we're talking about the sum of like 20% of your snaps are going to be like split up among those guys, and 20 that means that technically 20% of their snaps, individual snaps, will match that as well. And where 80% is mainly going to be whoever that slot wide receiver is. Because listen, that's why they went and got Dylan Johnson, right? They went and got Dylan Johnson because they told us that they think that there are 3 different roles, 3 defined roles, or however many it was at the combine, that they need at running back. They need 3 defined players. They need a guy that can, play all 3 phases of the game. They need your game breaker. And then you need your guy that could be in there and goal line, short yardage situation.
Dylan Johnson.
Dylan Johnson's that guy.
Yeah.
They have told us that they love flexibility, but they need someone to play a specific role. And that's why, yes, you can get creative like you're saying. But if you're asking me, day one, it's not about can they get creative. Yes, they could entirely get creative. We've hit that nail on the head. But if you're asking me, if they play 80% of their snaps in the entire year, okay, at 11 personnel, who will come out as the wide receiver 3 in that scenario? It will be Kyle Phillips.
Man, what formation do you think they play the most?
11 personnel.
Okay, all right.
I mean, they used the shit out of the 11 personnel with the Cincinnati Bengals. They are like the 11 personnel kings, if I'm not mistaken.
And right now at 13 personnel, it's nobody.
3 tight ends. I guess you're maybe putting Dylan Johnson or John Ojukwu out there at this point. I mean,
I wouldn't look. And now this is an old coordinator, old offense.
Hey, put Tavondre Sweat or Jeffrey Simmons as your 3rd tight end, because guess what? They have both caught touchdown passes.
I look. Again, if we're talking about getting super creative, if you got a guy who's 235 pounds and can't seem to stay in shape, we've seen this team, different coach, different coordinator, I get it, get super creative with Traylon Burks as well. So just, big fella. He might be bigger. You never know. Let's go running back real fast because we know the top 2 are Pollard and Spears. I think the question here is Dylan Johnson versus Julius Chestnut versus Hassan Haskins, right?
Yeah, well, the real question is what UFL team does Hassan Haskins and Julius Chestnut play for next year? That's the real question.
So you're Dylan Johnson all the way already.
Yeah, it's no contest. He's way better than both those guys.
Okay, I mean, I agree with you. I just, you never know until they get the pads on. Yeah. But I agree with you.
I mean, I am fairly confident that Dylan Johnson's going to win that RB3 job.
Oh, by the way, what about Colton Dowell still on the team as like a deep outside?
Well, he's on the team, but he ain't going to be good. He ain't going to be healthy until October. Yeah. He tore his ACL and meniscus. I don't understand. And this is not against you. Someone else said this the other day because I was kind of going through and pulling the players that they lost on special teams. Because someone was like, well, what about Colton Dowell? Okay, well, Colton Dowell, that's 139 snaps, right, that you lost on special teams, and very rare, many, I mean, like maybe 14 on offense. But he tore his ACL. So he's starting on the PUP or IR or something, and you may not see him till October. And at that point, you can't really do anything with Colton Dowell, so you can't factor really him. And if he comes back, he comes back, right? But you're talking about 2 tight ends that you don't have on the roster anymore, in Kevin Rader and Chris Moore. Trevon Wesco, Terrell Edmonds, and Monty Rice were all like pretty big, heavily involved in the special teams. James Williams factors in, Jalen Harrell factors in, obviously Cedric Gray and all that kind of stuff. But those guys, they made up 747 of the snaps. So that's a lot of snaps to find, but that's, again, Colton Dowell just doesn't factor into your plans at this point.
Well, not to go back to receiver for too long here, but Hopkins, Ridley, Burks, NWI, Phillips, Jackson, that would be 6. When Dowell's healthy, when Dowell's healthy, he could be 7. Otherwise, it's Kinsey, Kiaris Jackson. So this is why they're talking to Tyler Boyd, because otherwise you have Phillips and Jackson both on the roster, and without Dowell being fully healthy. So running backs, I agree. I would like to see Julius Chestnut and Dylan Johnson go head-to-head this offseason. I think they're the two better options. I'm with you on Hassan Haskins. He's just not explosive enough. I think he's dependable, but not explosive enough. Which brings us to tight end. We've talked about it. The guy's not there yet. They've got to go find a piece on the roster. Now, the starting lineup on the offensive line, J.C. Latham, Peter Skoronski, Lloyd Cushenberry, Daniel Brunskill, NPF, probably your projected starting offensive line right now. Dylan Radins is a guy that could play both backup guard or back up your right tackle. You have Jalen Duncan.
He may
still
even
battling.
win the guard job. You never know.
Never know. But who, like, you got Charles, you got Rupchich. Who else is in this conversation that is fighting for a legitimate roster spot? Because you kind of have a clear top. I would say top. Would you say top 7? You have a clear top 7?
Let's see. Name your top 7.
So Latham, Skoronski, Cush, Brunskill, MPF, Radins is 6. Is Duncan number 7?
Duncan 7. Sadiq Charles is 8.
Charles is 8.
I would say that, but all three of those, I would say those guys have a near 80% chance to make it.
I
think that you could look at. They may be curious to see what they have in John Ojukwu. They really love this Cole Spencer kid as a guard as well, so he could push maybe a Sadiq Charles out. But I think that you're talking about a team that's and then Leroy Watson. He's out there too as a guard, tackle flex guy. I would say that they're pretty set, but we know they talked about to Andres Pete. But, then they got J.C. Latham. So maybe that killed everything with Andres Pete. And maybe they're just going to wait until after camp kind of like filters out. We'll see who's doing good, who made improvements, and all this kind of stuff. So I'm not happy with the depth, I guess you could say, after you get out of that. I love Jalen Duncan, but it's really hard to put your faith in Jalen Duncan.
Odds are these guys.
Dylan Radins, I would say like Dylan Radins, Sadiq Charles. Then
okay, that's fine. That's fine.
I would say people are really worried about this backup center position, but people have to understand that I know they've tried snaps at Dylan Radins there in the past, and we also know that Brunskill can play center, so I'm not too concerned with backup center at this current construction.
I was going to ask you, who is officially the backup center? The answer is Daniel Brunskill.
I would say probably Brunskill. Yeah.
I do think that for if Duncan is your 8th, you have to bank on 6, 7, and 8 playing snaps. How many snaps is probably going to dictate how good the season is. I mean, that's every offensive line in the NFL. Same thing with the receiving core. Like you have to bank on guys getting reps. The question is how many. And I think from a 6, 7, 8 standpoint, if you're talking about Dylan Radins, Sadiq Charles, and Jalen Duncan as 6, 7, 8, I think you're obviously in a significantly better place than you were last year. We'll see. I am interested in John Ojukwu. I think Ojukwu is a very interesting piece for that group. But otherwise, there's a chance that maybe one of these UDFAs makes the team, I guess.
It would just be Cole Spencer would be my betting favorite, but I think that you do have to watch for Leroy Watson being a heavy favorite, even over NPF or anything. I mean, I don't see it, but I do think that Daniel's right, is that like I think it'll be NPF at RT, but it could be Watson. I keep forgetting he exists, and I think pretty much everybody does. That they did trade a 7th round pick for him. And again, that doesn't mean anything, but does mean that Bill Callahan likes him enough to convince Rand Carthon to trade a 7th to take a chance on him when you could have just got like an Ethan Driscoll who may be the same thing,
To me, it means he's ahead of Duncan is what it means.
More than likely. I think that's fair. I think that's fair.
Which to me, if Duncan is now your 9th offensive lineman, when you were asking him to play starters reps last year, kind of shows the work you've done in the offseason. Okay.
It'll be interesting to see how they handle the left tackle spot. Like behind J.C. Latham, who is the guy that's going to be behind there? Will that be Leroy Watson, or will that be Jalen Duncan, or will that be a guy that they bring in later? Yeah. I do think though, Cole Spencer is probably the only UDFA that I would have faith that is going to make it in.
Remember the names, because I'm going to bring up some other names in this group as well. Traylon Burks is the first one. Dylan Radins is the second one. Maybe Kyle Phillips is the third one. I'm going to add now. I want to jump down to corner because it seems pretty easy to talk through corner. With Chidobe Awuzie and L'Jarius Sneed, 2 starting outsiders. Then you have Roger McCreary and Jarvis Brownlee as maybe your 2, as sort of your 1 and 2 slot corner. You then Caleb Farley is a name that is a house money guy with Traylon Burks and Dylan Radins. If he becomes a contributor, he's total house money. Lots of ability, lots of skill, maybe some positionless ability as well, but you can't count on anything from him. And so to me, he's a house money guy that could be CB5. He might be DB6 or 7. I don't know. But then you also have Trey Avery, Kendall, Gowan, Guerrer. You got Gabe Judy Lally as a UDFA. But it seems like the top 5 are pretty clear. Wouzier, Snead, McCreary, Farley, Brownlee. Does that sound fair?
Yeah, they're going to keep a lot of corners, I feel like. If I were banking on the second highest position group behind the offensive linemen, of course, they really kind of all get lumped in together. But I feel like there's going to be a lot of DBs on this group, and I think there's going to be a lot of cornerbacks. I think that Caleb Farley has a chance to make it, whether he's cornerback or not, I don't know. You may just have to call them all DBs at this point. I think Gabe Judy Lally has a good chance. That's a guy that they paid some guaranteed money and signing bonus to. They spent a lot of time with him at the local pro day and did, believe even virtual meetings as well, if I'm not mistaken. But they also tried him out at punt returner. That's another guy that everybody needs to be on the lookout for. As this, I know everybody thought Jaquan Jackson is your guy at returner. That's another guy that I think that they would prefer to have, as crazy as it sounds, and a corner / returner than a wide receiver / returner. I just think that they seem to like him. I think Trey Avery makes it. I just think Eric Guerrer is the odd man out, and I think Jarvis Brownlee Jr. is, like we said on Monday, your definitive cornerback 4, inside or outside. He's first man up.
One quick note, and I guess Friday night at the draft party, thanks to Sinkers Beverages, Kingston Group, Lachlan Table, Edley's Barbecue, et cetera, et cetera. But one of the things we talked about with D-Mace was the skill set of the return man might be changing. And this maybe goes back to like Julius Chestnut. I don't know if there's another player that has more of a running back's vision and slashing sort of style, because of the new rules, it's going to be less about straight line speed and jitteriness, whereas it's going to be maybe more of how do you run behind an offensive line, set up blocks, and then cut, which is kind of a different skill set. And so maybe that affects what skills they're looking at from a return standpoint. But just something worth remembering, that running backs might be more valuable as kick returners now than corners or receivers. Just something to point out. But when you're talking about guys that are like being pushed out because the team is hopefully getting better, like you are talking about names like Kiaris Jackson, Mason Kinsey, Kyle Phillips, and Trey Avery, Eric Guerrer. Like the bottom half of the secondary and the receiving core are like the top list of players that I'm willing to bet you Titans fans are like, thank you for your service.
Yeah.
but I'd like you never to be a part of this team again.
An interesting name in this cornerback room, and he's listed as a cornerback on Pro Football Reference. I don't know really if he's maybe a little bit more positionless than what we think. But Anthony Kendall led the entire Titans team last year in special team snap count with 353 or 323 out of 454. That seems like a guy that's probably going to stick and take up a spot. So I would feel pretty confident to maybe half pin, maybe keep Anthony in pen and Kendall in pencil. But I'm pretty confident that a guy like that is going to be on this team, and that takes up a spot, right? And so we'll see how that works out. But they were pretty comfortable with carrying him last year, even with like Eric Guerrer and Trey Avery not doing that kind of stuff. So Trey Avery played 172 snaps on special teams as well. So to me, it's like Eric Guerrer, you're probably gone. And I hate that because I think he's a good story. But
Derek says, hopefully we never have to see Trey Avery on the field. Zach says, what about Jamari Small potentially as a good kickoff returner? That's not a terrible option. You could do worse. But
he's just there to sell preseason tickets.
I tend to agree with you. Again, there's two groups of people that I think when you do this exercise and you start looking at the new depth chart, there's two groups of people. There's the group of people at the bottom of the roster that have no real business being on an NFL roster that fans are probably tired of seeing. Again, I think Mason Kinsey embodies this, even though they seem to love him. I think Eric Guerrer is in that group. We'll get to all the linebackers, but all of the linebackers are in that group. Please God, we're good without you the rest of the way. And then there's these house money guys that I think, again, I'll describe in a minute, which I think could eventually be the difference in making a playoff or spot or not. Who else is in so you've got Awuzie, Sneed, Farley, McCreary, Brownlee. You're thinking Kendall and maybe two more, Avery and Judy Lolly.
Gabe Judy, yeah. I think
Okay.
Gabe Judy's probably going to make this team.
Okay.
And I think it will be solely because of special teams.
If they don't sign a safety, excuse me, you're going to have Hooker, Molden, and what? Shaheem Carter, Mike Brown, Matthew Jackson as your like who are you keeping?
And Mike Brown, Matthew Jackson, Elijah Molden, and Amani Hooker would be your four safeties.
Four safeties. Okay, so ultimately, there's not a lot of names in that group in particular that are sort of like in either of these categories.
I'm a big Shaheem Carter fan. He's like my Julius Chestnut, Kyle Pecco.
Yeah,
I think he's a lot better than what people think. But I mean, I'll be honest, it's just going to be Mike Brown, Matthew Jackson because they play more special teams, and that's what it comes down to. Your tiebreaker is always going to be special teams for the back end guys.
No question, and I just don't think there's enough. There's anybody
nothing there to really cling to.
Or on either of these categories. There's no house money guys and there's no like clean house guys. Now at linebacker, there's a lot of, I think there's actually both, but mostly it's clean house guys. It's team guys. You look at this list and Chance Campbell, Luke Gifford. I assume Jack Gibbons is going to make the team as a backup. I assume Otis Reese makes the team as a backup with Murray and Gray as your starters. But I think Titans fans would be totally fine if Gifford and Campbell never played a down for the Tennessee Titans ever again.
I wouldn't want that for special teams purposes. I would rather Jack Gibbons be gone than Luke Gifford. Like, to me, I would rather have Luke Gifford be your fifth linebacker than Jack Gibbons be your fourth linebacker, because I think you got to factor in James Williams into that, right? I think that James Williams is a guy that is going to. Jack Gibbons played 198 special teams. Now, I'm on a big special teams kick today because this is when you talk about these back end guys, it's really what matters. I keep bringing that up. But if you were to get rid, but Luke Gifford was 259. So if James Williams comes in and plays, and he takes up, a lot of these snaps on special teams that are missing and can play. Remember, there's 454 last year. So to me, it's like I would rather have the combination of Luke Gifford, James Williams, that we know have the speed, have the gunner, can take away some of these other guys, than have Jack Gibbons, who may play linebacker. But at the end of the day, I think they keep five. I think Chance Campbell's on the outside looking in. I think
all right, who do you?
Chance Campbell.
I know that you're absolutely correct that special teams is the vast majority of the decision making when it comes to the last, let's say, 8 to 10 spots. Tiebreakers, absolutely. But who do you want third off the bench? Number one off the bench. If something happened, you got
Reese.
I mean, that's kind of how I feel, because you got a rookie and a newcomer, which means you have to prepare. And I don't love the idea that Otis Reese is coming off the bench, but I really liked him in practice last year, and I thought he flashed a couple things at the end of last season, last few games. I think he has some ability.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think Otis Reese. My preferred method would be Otis Reese and James Williams would be your top two linebackers behind the other two.
God, it's a lot of inexperience in your top four.
It is, but hey, that's the room they built. So you have to play within the room that you built. You don't have to like it.
That's true.
But that's what they built, right? Like, this is what they decided that they were going to do. I don't even know if there's a linebacker out there that.
Nope, there's not. There's not.
It's Quan Alex. I thought Quan Alexander maybe signed already. Maybe I'm wrong.
I would take Quan Alexander.
You got Dylan Cole, Zach Cunningham.
Dylan.
Leonard,
I don't want any former Titans.
That's it. That's what I'm saying. That's what you got. There's not much out there.
Oh, God bless you, James Williams. Thoughts and prayers.
Yeah, this is why you probably, if you want to talk about overpaying a player that you should have overpaid and not let leave, that would have been Jerome Baker. You still could have drafted a linebacker of the future and just had Jerome Baker on a 1-year deal. But this is the hand that you're dealt. This is why that Cedric Gray, day one, week one of camp, has to be your green dot linebacker, because this is what they chose. This is the bed
that they made. All right. What your starting defensive line is obviously Tavondre Sweat and Jeffrey Simmons with Harold Landry and then Sebastian Joseph Day. That's probably your starting front four at this point. So,
no. Let me. Sorry, I don't include Harold Landry's an edge. So when you say defensive line, I'm saying that your defensive line is right now is Jeffrey Simmons, Tavondre Sweat, Sebastian Joseph Day, Keandre Coburn. Now, if you want to include your edge, right now it is Arden Key, Harold Landry.
Right, but you're not. That's 6 names along the defensive line. So I'm just using them all into one big group here. We'll start on the inside, which is
edges. So
we'll start in the inside, and well, as far as I know, the edge lines up on the line of scrimmage, which makes you a defensive lineman in theory. Simmons and Sweat are your interior defensive tackles. Mm-hmm. Who's backing them up?
Sebastian Joseph Day and Keandre Coburn.
Oh, so those are your okay. So you're saying those are your second stringers.
Yeah.
When they are when they line up, it's Simmons. So you're saying it's Simmons, Sweat, Landry, Key is your starting front line.
Yeah. That's pretty obvious in my book. I don't see anybody taken for Key, right? I mean, like they've again, it's kind of like the linebacker situation. The defensive line situation is not as bad as what it was, but your edge situation is just the same as it was last year. You're just moving up Jalen Harrell over 2 other guys. I mean, that's just he's still your backup.
There's a piece missing here, boys.
Yeah. Well, that's why I say Carl Lawson. I really think that maybe they believe that Jalen Harrell can come in and spell Arden Key, but you really don't. Like Kenneth Murray is kind of like your. And I say that on Football and Other F Words or this morning. I was on another show this morning, Glory Day Sports, that like it's kind of like you're going to have 2 chances to either make a tackle or miss a tackle on Arden Key's side. Either Arden Key's going to get there and make or miss it, or Kenneth Murray's going to get there and make or miss it, and then the other one's going to back him up. So, like, that's just kind of how you're playing run defense on that side of the line, right? I mean, like, you know, if you got your outside zone runs, that's kind of how it's going to be. It's going to be interesting to have, like, Arden Key Kenneth Murray on the same side of the field.
The rotation on the front 7 is going to be utterly fascinating to track over the course of the season.
It is
Rashad, you still have Rashad Weaver, you have Thomas Rush, you have TK McClendon, you have Caleb Murphy. Caleb Murphy, I think, falls. So here's the 2 guys. Caleb Murphy is the guy that, maybe he falls into the Chance Campbell, Eric Garrer, like we're done with you kind of category. We're tired of you being on the roster kind of category. And Rashad Weaver falls into the house money category, where with Caleb Farley and Traylon Burks and Kyle Phillips, which is I'm not counting on anything, but if something does happen, it's house money. That's how I would look at it.
I would say that I think Rashad Weaver can venture across state lines in those 2 categories. I could see a total scenario where they're just like, yeah, we're kind of done with you. See ya. We don't care that we have ghosts behind you. We just don't. You're just not that great. But I could also see that he's a house money guy too. So it's kind of like he kind of straddles both. Caleb Murphy, I don't know what I feel about Caleb Murphy other than he's just a guy until proven otherwise. And I think if anybody goes crazy about preseason games and snaps and sacks and all that kind of stuff, just setting yourself up for failure.
All right. So number 1 question I wanted to ask you, and then I've got another quick last nugget here at the end. Sinkers Beverages hats, by the way, if you're watching on YouTube, give us a thumbs up. Give us a subscription. We'd really appreciate it. Make sure, of course, on Twitter and Facebook, you're sharing the product as well. And then, of course, rate, review, and subscribe in the podcast app. Special thanks to Sinkers Beverages for all the great stuff that they do, and the Kingston Group as well for supporting all the great 440 Sports Network products. So here's ultimately my kind of one of my, like a broad theory that I came to doing this exercise, in that I think this team is going to be, the roster is better. The players are better. The offense should be better. We know all the basic stuff here. You don't make these changes if they don't expect that, which means 5 or 6 wins should show some improvement. Maybe not. Certainly outside projections are not suggesting that, but I think it's okay to say they should get better. I think if this team is going to press for a playoff spot, meaning an AFC South division title or even a 500 record, everything that we assume about this team has to happen. All the good players have to be good. Harold Landry has to be healthy and good. Amani Hooker has to be healthy and good. Ridley and Hopkins and Levis and Latham, everything that's big on the team, you have to assume that it's working. So to me, the depth in the NFL is what sort of sometimes can push you over the top or win you an extra game or 2. And to me, it's the house money guys that could decide whether or not this season is a competitive playoff season or if it's just sort of another rebuilding year. And that is Traylon Burks, Kyle Phillips, Caleb Farley, Dylan Radens, Rashad Weaver. Like those 5 plus a few others, those guys are probably going to be on the team. They were drafted highly-ish with some pedigree, and there's reasons why Like those guys have given them almost nothing in the beginnings of their career. If a new coaching staff and a new GM and a new strength and conditioning staff can find a way to generate contributions from that group of players, I think that can actually be the difference between 7 and 10 and 8 or 9 wins, which again is not a lot, and that puts them into a playoff competition. Is that crazy to think?
No, this is just a top-heavy roster still. I mean, it's very much you have to pray that you have turned the injury luck around, that Zach Woodfin has lit some sage and is going around doing some mantras and warding off all the evil spirits left over from the John Robinson, Mike Vrabel era, because injury, your cornerback is your deepest spot. Like if Cheeto goes down, it is a drop off between Cheeto and Jarvis Brown-Lee, but you still can get league average play. Unlike the last few years, you couldn't get league average play. Like you got above league average play right now, but you could at least get league average. The right side of the offensive line, hell, you got 13 guys that are trying to play for spots on the right side of the offensive line as we currently know it. We don't know who they're going to put over on the left side. That includes Peter Skoronski's spot. That includes, J.C. Latham's spot. The depth behind over there is pretty thin for what we know right now. Hopefully some of those 13 guys that are all right side guys can play left. But that's a really tough spot over there. Wide receiver it's a huge, the drop off between Cheeto and Jarvis Brown-Lee Jr. and the drop off between DeAndre Hopkins and Nick Westbrook-Ikine or Calvin Ridley and Traylon Burks right now is massive.
Yep. I actually think, could I say that running back is as deep as corner? Like I like the running back room.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah, I would say, well, it's because you have two of the same guys. They're like the exact same guy, and that always helps. And then I think Dylan Johnson behind them is really good. And then you can call up Julius Chestnut off the street if you need to or something. I mean, running backs at that point, you get to a certain point, if you're in the Julius Chestnut range where he's getting considerable snaps, just you could sign a guy. Like, right? Like,
who was it last year? Jock Patrick last year, right? They went.
Yeah. So to me, it's like, safety's thin, edge is super thin, defensive line is still thin. I mean, it's not bad as edge or safety, but tight end, man, that tight end room and that inside linebacking room, that safety room, that edge room, that is a lot of cause for concern right there.
That's a lot of rooms you have cause for concern after just acquiring free agents and draft picks.
Right.
That's a problem. Is what you're asking is you're asking what this, like, ultimately what it might mean is that Ran Carthon, like the way fans judge Ran Carthon moving forward, is probably exclusively tied to J.C. Latham and T'Vondre Sweat. If they are two starting members of the offensive and defensive line for the next 5 years, people will probably view him as doing an excellent job. If they are not, they're probably going to circle those the way people used to circle Isaiah Wilson and the A.J. Brown trade and all these other things that John Robinson screwed up. Last but not least here, and we'll let you guys go on this one. This is more of a J.C. Latham messaging Twitter strategy that you know how I was joking that I thought Titans Twitter went opposite on the J.C. Latham pick. Normally, you tweet out something relatively logical and relatively sane and relatively normal, and then the conversation from there on Twitter devolves into something atrocious and disgusting and absurd, and people go to their corners and they end up like flinging fecal matter at each other in a locked room like a bunch of baboons. Like that's what happens with Twitter. Titans Twitter was kind of the opposite on Thursday night, where the J.C. Latham pick happened. Everyone was kind of pissed off about it, didn't understand it, didn't love it, and then by the end of the night, 11 o'clock midnight, fans that come around on it really liked the pick. Well, the more I thought about it, the more I thought this was a concerted PR strategy by the Titans. That they had the Bill Callahan story leak ready to go. That was probably already previously leaked as soon as they knew Latham was going to be the pick. They probably had that leak to Diana Rossini. They had the Bill Callahan angle. This was his baby. We love, he loves him. He loves him. Ran Carthon came out specifically said left tackle right away. Like, this is not a right tackle. This is a left tackle. Like, they had a PR strategy around the draft pick of J.C. Latham pretty ready to deploy pretty fast. And through the course of a couple of hours, it went from J.C. Latham to, all right, J.C. Latham. And I think that was all the Titans PR. I think they did all of that on their own.
Well, it worked because I don't know if you saw your boy from ESPN, Matt Miller, went on Ramon, Kayla, and Will this morning and stuck to his guns that J.C. Latham is a guard, like a fool, like a foolish thing to say. I can see why a couple scouts or other respected draft analysts have him blocked. But man, I tell you, don't say a bad word about J.C. Latham for a while, because Titans Twitter's coming at you, and they pulled up every terrible receipt, bad frozen take that he's had over the last 2 or 3 years, and all that. So,
but
J.C. Latham's baby boy, Tavondre Sweat, not so much. J.C. Latham's baby boy.
I mean, it's when you start to think about how that night unfolded, like it was so intentionally, like it was orchestrated by the Tennessee Titans. And sure, like they believe in J.C. Latham. That's the reason they picked him. Of course, it's not disingenuous. Like they believe him. Here's all the reasons. But they had some tricks up their sleeve to try to get public favor on their side, and it worked.
Hey, at least
it worked.
At least someone's doing something in that department now.
Diana Rossini's talking to people other than Mike Vrabel, obviously, so that's good. So there's that. But just there's a reason that. Like,
she must have came and begged, right? Came and begged. She's I haven't had any Titans news in a while, so please come help me.
This is what I'm telling you. I don't think it was that way at all. This was like the whole time. No, Bill Callahan's not around. He's not a part of this project. Like it's all about Brian Callahan. We hired Brian Callahan, not Bill Callahan. Brian. And then the very first thing they post about J.C. Latham is how important Bill Callahan is. Yeah. And that is not an accident. That was done on purpose to make sure that the story about how much they love J.C. Latham got out quickly through another source. And, oh, by the way, Green Dot, exactly. Hey, we're going to do Green Dot, Cedric Gray. Hey, we're going to play him at left tackle, J.C. Latham. Like, they had a concerted PR strategy around these picks, and that's good. The picks may be bad or good, we don't know. But again, the process has been sound through all this. How they played the draft, how they picked the picks, how they then PR'd the draft afterward has been executed pretty well. Whether those players are good at football, who knows? We'll find out. All right, stackingtheinbox.com. What do you have coming up for the guys and girls this weekend?
Sweat propaganda machine rolls on at stackingtheinbox.com with a film room coming out tomorrow.
There you have it. So check out all the great work over there, stackingtheinbox.com. Of course, you can get to me at Braden Gall, at 440 Sports, at FWordsPod. Rate, review, and subscribe on the podcast. Give us a thumbs up and a subscription, of course, on the YouTube page, and share and like and all that great stuff on Facebook and Twitter. We do appreciate you guys for supporting us. And to Sinkers Beverages, into the Kingston Group. You got the Sobros Network as well. Make sure you check them out. And Stoney, always a pleasure to have you in the chat, spamming us. We do appreciate that. Otherwise, have a great weekend. We'll see if the Predators play another game. Otherwise, enjoy the game on Friday evening. We will be back on Monday. Thanks for listening. Have a great weekend, everybody.